There are moments in the life of every believer when heaven appears silent. The prayers ascend, but the reply seems withheld. You cry out in the midnight hour, yet the heavens feel like brass. You fast, you knock, you seek, and still the silence lingers. It is then that the enemy whispers his ancient lies, that God has turned his face, that you have been forgotten, that your prayers are in vain. But the truth is deeper, higher, and more mysterious. God's silence is not God's absence. The absence of a visible move does not mean the absence of a divine hand. The hiddenness of God is not the weakness of God. It is the mystery of a God who is always at work, even in the unseen. The scriptures are filled with moments when God appears to be silent, yet behind that silence, a story is always being written. Consider the children of Israel in Egypt. Generations came and went under the yoke of bondage. Centuries passed. No prophet was sent. No voice thundered from Sinai. No miracle split the heavens. But it was not because God was idle. No, he was weaving deliverance in secret. While Pharaoh was tightening his grip, God was preserving a Levite child named Moses. While taskmasters cracked their whips, God was preparing a bush that would burn and a rod that would part the sea. While the people cried in silence, God heard every groan and recorded every tear. And in the fullness of time, the silence broke and the exodus began. What appeared to be divine stillness was in fact divine strategy. So it was again in the days before Messiah. 400 years passed between the last prophet of Israel and the birth of Yeshua. 4 centuries without a voice from the Lord. The prophets ceased. The visions were rare. The temple stood, but the glory was veiled. Yet God had not abandoned his people. The silence was the pause before the trumpet. Behind the scenes, Rome rose to power. Roads were built across the empire. Greek became the common tongue. All of it laying the foundation for the gospel to spread to the nations. In the stillness, God was preparing the world stage. In the silence, he was setting the cornerstone. And when the time had fully come, the word broke the silence and became flesh. Even in your life, you may be walking through a season of silence. You've prayed, you've waited, you've believed, and nothing seems to move. But I tell you, God has not stopped working. His hand is moving where your eyes cannot see. Like the roots of a tree growing deep beneath the earth, like the seed breaking open in the darkness of soil, God's purpose is advancing beneath the surface. You may not hear the answer yet, but the answer is already forming. You may not see the change yet, but the shift has already begun. For the God of Israel does not slumber nor sleep. He is never idle. His silence is not the end. It is the sacred stillness before the miracle. Look again at the story of Elijah. The prophet stood on Mount Horeb broken and alone. He had seen fire fall from heaven, but now he feared for his life. He waited for God to speak, and a great wind came, but God was not in the wind. Then an earthquake, but God was not in the earthquake. Then a fire, but God was not in the fire. And then came a still small voice, a whisper, the voice of God, hidden in the silence. Why? Because the Almighty does not always move in the spectacle. He is not always in the thunder. Sometimes he is found in the quiet. Sometimes he speaks in the pause. Sometimes he hides his power in stillness so that you will seek him more deeply, trust him more fully, and walk by faith, not by sight. The Hebrew scriptures reveal a God who is often veiled. His glory was hidden behind the veil in the temple. His name was hidden in the scroll of Esther. His hand was hidden in the life of Joseph. But though hidden, he was never absent. And what is true in scripture is true in your life. You may not see him now, but he sees you. You may not hear him now, but he hears you. He is not silent because he has left. He is silent because he is working a deeper work, a work that must unfold in mystery, a work that is born in secret and revealed in glory. So it is a pattern woven into the scrolls of Scripture, a mystery that moves beneath the surface of the text, a divine signature etched not in thunder, but in the quiet movements of history. It is the pattern of the hidden hand, the hand of God that moves behind the veil, unseen, unheard, yet always active. The sacred writings are filled with this hiddenness, this divine working in the shadows, this orchestration that escapes the sight of men until the moment of revelation. And those who walk in faith must learn to recognize it, not by sight, but by trust, not by signs, but by discernment. For the God of Abraham often chooses not the loud trumpet, but the subtle shift, not the spotlight, but the concealed thread that ties everything together in holy purpose. Consider Joseph, the beloved son of Jacob. He had dreams, visions from the Almighty that foretold his rise. But no sooner had the dreams been spoken than the nightmare began. His brothers plotted against him, cast him into a pit, sold him to Ishmaelites who brought him into Egypt. There, in a land of idols, he was falsely accused, imprisoned, and forgotten. Where was the hand of God? The heavens were silent. His dreams seemed to mock him. But the hand had never left him. In the prison, the hand was preparing him for the palace. In the pit, the hand was positioning him for purpose. The hidden hand was orchestrating famine and plenty, dreams and interpretations, betrayals and promotions, all to bring Joseph to the right place at the right time, to preserve the line of Israel and fulfill the covenant. When Joseph stood before his brothers, no longer the dreamer but the ruler, he did not say, "You sent me here." He said, "God sent me ahead to save many lives." The hidden hand was never absent. It was simply not seen until the hour of unveiling. Now then there is the story of Esther. A Jewish orphan, raised in exile, taken into the courts of a foreign king, crowned queen in a pagan palace, and then a plot unfolds to destroy her people. The name of God is never mentioned in the entire scroll, not once. No prophet speaks, no angel appears, no miracle interrupts the narrative, yet the entire story is a miracle. A sleepless night, a forgotten deed recorded in a royal book, a timely request, a bold fast, an uninvited approach to the king, a gallows prepared for a man who would never hang on it. These are the fingerprints of the hidden hand. Esther did not part seas, but she turned the tide of history. She did not call down fire, but she extinguished the fire of destruction, because the hand of God was at work in every detail. Hidden, yes. Silent, yes, but present and powerful. And so it has always been. The God of Israel is a God who often hides himself. The prophet Isaiah declared, "Truly you are a God who hides yourself, O God of Israel, the Savior." He hides not because he is absent, but because he is holy. He hides not to conceal truth, but to invite the seeking heart. The Hebrew word for world is olam, and it shares the same root as olam, which means hidden. Why? Because the world itself is a veil that hides the presence of its maker. He is everywhere, and yet he is not seen. His glory fills the heavens, and yet he dwells in thick darkness. His voice shapes the ages, and yet it is often heard only in the still, small whisper. And those who follow him must learn to walk not by what is revealed, but by what is promised. The pattern of the hidden hand is not only found in the lives of biblical heroes, it is also woven into the life of Messiah. When he walked the earth, he did not come in the form expected. He did not sit on Caesar's throne or command armies. He came as the suffering servant, despised and rejected by men. His birth was hidden in a manger, his miracles often silenced, his identity veiled from those who should have known. And even in his crucifixion, the hidden hand was at work. For what appeared to be defeat was in truth the greatest victory. The cross, a Roman instrument of death, became the mercy seat of heaven. The tomb, sealed and guarded, became the doorway of resurrection. The hidden hand turned betrayal into redemption, suffering into salvation, and death into everlasting life. This same hand still moves in the lives of those who belong to him. It may not always be visible. It may not part the sea or shake the mountain, but it moves just the same. It guides, protects, opens, closes, positions, and prepares. It works through circumstances, through delays, through people who do not even know they are being used. The hand that was hidden in Egypt, in Persia, in Galilee, is hidden in your life as well. Not every miracle looks like a miracle. Not every intervention comes with a voice from heaven. But if you look back, you will see the evidence. If you listen carefully, you will hear the echo. The hand has been there all along. There is a mystery that flows through the journey of the righteous, a mystery that offends the natural mind and challenges the impatient heart. It is the mystery of divine delay. To the flesh, delay appears as denial. To the carnal eye, it seems as though the hand of God has paused, as though his promises have faltered. But the Spirit reveals something greater. That delay is not the absence of movement, but the perfection of timing. God is not slow as man counts slowness. He moves in his own appointed times, in the moedim of heaven, where every moment is pregnant with purpose. What appears to be hesitation is in truth preparation. What seems to be withholding is often a refining. The waiting room of God is not empty. It is filled with the unseen workings of eternity. When Messiah heard that Lazarus was sick, he did not run to heal him. He waited 2 days. He remained where he was while Lazarus died. To those who watched, it must have seemed cruel. The healer had delayed. The friend had tarried. But there was no panic in the steps of the Master, because he was not bound by urgency, but by the timeline of heaven. And when he arrived in Bethany, Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Too late by man's reckoning, but just in time for glory. Had he come sooner, it would have been a healing, but because he waited, it became a resurrection. What seemed like a delay was actually the divine stage being set for a greater revelation. And so it is for all who wait upon the Lord. His delays are not defeats, they are doorways. The children of Israel cried out under the burden of Pharaoh for generations. Their labor was heavy, their cries bitter. It would have been easy to believe that God had forgotten, but even as they toiled under the weight of slavery, God was working. He was preparing a deliverer, shaping Moses in the courts of Egypt, in the fields of Midian, and in the fires of the burning bush. Israel was not ready for deliverance until the appointed hour. The heart of Pharaoh was not yet hardened. The judgments had not yet been appointed. The Red Sea had not yet been positioned to be split. Delay was not abandonment, it was orchestration. David was anointed as king while still a youth, but he did not ascend to the throne the next day. He was sent back to tend sheep. Then he faced Goliath, served Saul, fled for his life, hid in caves, wandered in wilderness. Years passed between the anointing and the crowning. Delay. And yet, in that delay, he was trained, humbled, broken, refined. He learned to worship in the wilderness, to trust when hunted, to lead when surrounded by the discontented and distressed. Had he taken the throne too soon, he would have lacked the depth of character forged in the fire of delay. For God does not only prepare the place for the person, he prepares the person for the place. Even the promises of God to Abraham were wrapped in time. He was told he would be the father of many nations, yet years passed and no child came. The delay stretched beyond human reason until his body was as good as dead and Sarah's womb barren. But God waited on purpose, for when Isaac came, it was not by human strength or timing, but by the impossible power of God. The delay ensured that the glory would belong only to the Lord. That which was born in delay was born in covenant. The natural man despises delay, but heaven values process. The seed is not cast into the soil to bloom overnight. It must break open in darkness. It must send roots deep before it can grow upward. It must endure seasons unseen before it ever bears fruit. So it is with the purposes of God. What is born quickly often fades quickly, but what is forged in waiting will stand. Delay is where trust is proven. Delay is where faith becomes sight, not of the eyes, but of the Spirit. It is in the delay that idols are crushed, motives are purified, and dependence is shifted from self to God. Messiah himself waited. He waited 30 years before his ministry began. The Son of the Most High, born of a virgin, filled with all wisdom, waited in the quietness of Nazareth. He worked with his hands. He walked among the ordinary. He was hidden. The angels could have declared him every day, but they waited. Heaven was restrained until the fullness of time. And when the hour came, the voice spoke, the dove descended, and the work began. But only after the delay had done its work. Those who walk in covenant must walk in trust. Trust that sees beyond delay. Trust that understands that God does not operate on the schedule of man, but on the calendar of redemption. Trust that embraces the hiddenness, the stillness, the silence, knowing that behind it all, the author is still writing, the potter still shaping, the king still reigning. What appears as delay is often the very proof that something sacred is being prepared, not just for you, but in you. Faith is not the product of sight. It is its opposite. Sight is the confirmation of what already is, but faith is the conviction of what is not yet seen. Faith walks where sight cannot. It moves forward not because the path is visible, but because the voice has spoken. It obeys not because it understands, but because it trusts. The journey of faith is not a journey of the eyes, it is a journey of the Spirit. And those who would walk with God must walk in the dark, through the storm, across the sea, even when the horizon is empty and the evidence is absent. For faith is not anchored in what can be seen, but in the one who is unseen yet ever present. The children of Israel stood at the edge of the Red Sea, with Pharaoh's army behind them and the waters ahead. There was no bridge, no passage, no visible escape. All logic said they were trapped. Sight declared their doom. But Moses stretched forth his staff, not because he saw the path, but because he heard the command. The waters parted only after the step of obedience. The sea made way not before, but after. Sight waited for proof. Faith walked in advance. It is this walk, this forward motion in the absence of evidence, that defines the people of God. Cahn left his homeland, his family, his comfort, not knowing where he was going. He walked through deserts, dwelt in tents, wandered as a stranger in the land of promise. He had no map, no blueprint, no visible inheritance. Yet he moved forward. Why? Because he looked not with his eyes, but with his spirit. He saw a city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. He believed what had not yet been manifest. He trusted that what had not yet been fulfilled, and for that he became the father of all who walk by faith. His feet walked across sand, but his eyes were fixed on eternity. There is a Hebrew word, emunah, often translated as faith, but its root does not merely imply belief. It means firmness, stability, fidelity. It speaks of one who stands firm, who is unmoved, who remains when others fall away. Faith is not a fleeting emotion or hopeful thought. It is a steadfast stance of the soul. It is a refusal to be shaken, even when the winds howl and the earth trembles. It is what Daniel had when he opened his window to pray, knowing the lions awaited. It is what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had when they stood before the furnace and declared, even if he does not deliver us, we will not bow. Their faith was not in outcomes, it was in the character of God. The disciples were caught in a storm on the Sea of Galilee. The wind roared, the waves crashed, their boat was tossed like a leaf in the tempest. And Yeshua came to them walking on the water. It made no sense to the mind, no sense to the natural eye. But Peter stepped out of the boat. He walked toward the impossible. He defied the storm, not by logic, but by trust. And as long as his eyes were on the Master, he remained above the wave. It was only when he looked at the storm that he began to sink. For sight leads to fear, but faith leads to peace. The storm was always there. The wind never stopped, but faith walked until fear interrupted. So many walk only where they can see. They require the sign before they take the step. But that is not the way of the kingdom. The sign follows the obedience. The walls of Jericho fell after the 7th march. The manna came after the desert. The fire fell after the altar was drenched. The miracle always follows the movement of faith. Faith walks first. It is the pioneer, the forerunner. It clears the way for the evidence to arrive. Messiah said to Thomas, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." The greater blessing lies not in the seeing, but in the believing without seeing. This is the faith that pleases God. This is the faith that moves mountains, raises the dead, shuts the mouths of lions, quenches flames, and overcomes the world. Not a faith that demands proof, but a faith that rests in the promise. Not a faith that waits to walk, but a faith that walks while waiting. It is the faith of those who keep moving when nothing around them confirms the way, when every step is taken in the dark, when the only light is the word spoken long ago, and the only guide is the hand that cannot be seen, but is always there. But there is a reality deeper than what the eye perceives, a movement unfolding beyond the reach of the senses. It is the realm of the spirit where what is unseen governs what is seen, where the hand of the eternal shapes the moments of time. And in that realm, even when it looks like nothing is happening, everything is happening. For the God who watches over his word is not confined to visible signs. He is not limited by outward appearances or measured by the pace of man. He is the God who works in the silence, in the stillness, in the delay, and in the shadows. He works in the background, in the details, in the waiting, and in the wilderness. He works when you see him, and he works when you do not. When the seed is planted into the soil, there is no movement on the surface. Days pass, the earth is still, the field looks barren. But beneath the surface, the seed is breaking, roots are reaching downward, the soil is pressing, shaping, nourishing. There is a work in the darkness that the eye cannot detect. If one were to judge the field by what they see, they would declare it empty. But the field is not empty, it is it carries a future hidden from sight. So it is with the works of God. He moves underground. He answers prayers beneath the surface. He fulfills promises in realms hidden from your understanding. Elijah stood on Mount Carmel and prayed for rain. There had been drought in the land and the skies were empty. He bowed down and sent his servant to look toward the sea. The servant returned with nothing, no cloud, no sign. Elijah prayed again and sent him again. Still nothing. 7 times he sent him, and 6 times the sky remained unchanged. But Elijah did not stop. He knew the nature of God. He knew that the answer begins before the sign appears. On the 7th time the servant saw a cloud the size of a man's hand, small, barely visible, but that was all Elijah needed. He knew it had already begun long before the cloud had formed. The silence had already been broken in heaven. The movement of rain had already started when nothing could be seen on earth. In the tomb of Yeshua, all seemed finished. The stone was sealed. The body lay still. The disciples scattered, and the hopes of many faded into despair. But behind that stone, in the realm where time cannot reach, something was stirring. Death was being conquered. The veil was being torn. The grip of sin was being broken. The silence of the grave was being shattered by the power of resurrection. On the outside, it looked like defeat. But the greatest victory in history was unfolding where no eye could see and no man could interfere. The enemy thought he had won, but he could not perceive the movement that had already begun. For the deepest works of God are often born in the places least visible. The book of Ruth tells of famine, of loss, of Naomi's bitter return to Bethlehem. Ruth follows her into a land she does not know, gathers grain behind the reapers, and seems to live a life of humble obscurity. But every step, every gleaned stalk, every act of kindness was part of a divine choreography. She was walking into a legacy. She was becoming the great-grandmother of David, the ancestor of Messiah. She did not know, she could not see it, but heaven was aligning every detail. What looked like mere survival was actually the unfolding of prophecy. The quiet field of Boaz was a place of destiny. God's workings are not bound by human understanding. He does not need to announce every step. He does not require visible affirmation. He is not waiting for the approval of men. His thoughts are higher than ours. His ways are beyond tracing out. He works through the unexpected, the overlooked, the weak, and the hidden. He does not rush and he does not delay. His timing is perfect and his purpose is sure. When Joseph sat in a prison cell, he could not see the throne. When Moses was tending sheep in Midian, he could not see the Red Sea parting. When Hannah wept at the tabernacle, she could not see the prophet in her womb. Yet in each case, God was working. Behind the closed doors, beyond the silence, within the pain, he was moving. To trust God is not merely to believe when you see, it is to rest when you do not. It is to worship when you have no sign. It is to stand firm when everything in you cries out for proof. The invisible hand of God moves through your life, through your disappointments, through your delays, through your detours. You do not need to see it to believe it. You only need to know that He is faithful. His work is not confined to the spectacular, and often it is the unnoticed moment, the quiet decision, the simple obedience that unlocks the extraordinary. Heaven moves even in the smallest act of faith. The kingdom advances even in what appears to be stillness, and the purposes of God are never hindered by the silence of the present moment. Consider Esther, a young Jewish woman living in the Persian Empire. Her life at first glance seemed ordinary. She was taken into the palace, chosen as queen, her identity concealed, her influence untested. To many, her rise may have seemed coincidental, a stroke of fortune, but nothing in the life of a child of covenant is coincidence. Behind every moment was the orchestration of heaven. And Haman's plot to destroy the Jews was revealed. Mordecai's words echoed through time. Who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Esther had no idea that her steps, her placement, her silence, her elevation, all were part of a divine purpose that had been unfolding long before the crisis arrived. What seemed like a simple life transition was in fact a positioning for deliverance. She did not see it at first, but God was working even in her concealment, even in her confusion. Joseph's dreams were given in youth, but their fulfillment was delayed by betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment. In the natural, it looked as though the dreams had died. His brothers had stripped him of his coat, but they could not strip him of his destiny. Potiphar's house and Pharaoh's prison were not detours. They were the very pathway to Pharaoh's throne. In the prison cell, when all seemed forgotten, Joseph interpreted the dreams of others. And still, he remained in chains for 2 more years. Yet those 2 years were not wasted. They were preparation. They were the final strokes of the potter's hand, shaping a vessel fit to carry the weight of a nation's preservation. When Pharaoh's dream finally summoned him, Joseph stepped into the purpose that had been moving toward him all along, even when it seemed like nothing was happening. The purposes of God are layered, deep, and often beyond our grasp. What looks like delay is often protection. What feels like failure may be foundation. What appears to be silence may be the setting of the stage. David was anointed king, yet returned to the sheepfold. He was called, but not yet crowned. He sang songs to God while hidden from men. He fought bears and lions in private before ever facing a giant in public. Each hidden moment was essential. Each unseen victory prepared him for what would one day be revealed. The purpose of God was not only to bring David to the throne, but to make him into the kind of man who could remain on it. That purpose required time. It required process. It required a season in which the world saw nothing but God was doing everything. Is the very creation of the world reveals this mystery. In the beginning, the earth was formless and void, and darkness covered the face of the deep. There was no form, no structure, no light, but the Spirit of God hovered over the waters. The Word had not yet spoken, but the presence was already moving. Before God said, "Let there be light," He was already there. Before the first command, there was already intention. Even in the void, God was present. Even in the chaos, He was working. And from that formless beginning, He brought forth order, life, and purpose. The same Spirit that hovered over the waters hovers over your life, over the places that seem void and formless. He speaks light into your darkness, order into your chaos, and purpose into your pain. Sometimes the purpose of God is only visible in retrospect. What once confused you begins to make sense. The path that once seemed broken reveals its perfection. The trial that once seemed pointless is seen to have birthed endurance, character, and hope. The people who left made room for those who were called to remain. The doors that closed redirected you to the ones you were truly meant to walk through. In the moment, it may not feel like God is working, but the story is not finished. The author is still writing, and he does not waste a word. The hand of God is subtle. It often does not shout. It whispers. It often does not blaze. It burns quietly, like the bush before Moses, a flame yet unconsumed. That bush was in the wilderness, off the beaten path, unremarkable to most. Yet it was there that the divine purpose was revealed. Not in the palace, not in the temple, but in the dry, deserted place. Because the purpose of God is not confined to the grand stages of life. It moves through the ordinary, the humble, the hidden, and the obscure. It unfolds in ways that escape human calculation, and it is never hindered by the appearance of stillness, because the eternal is never still.